In a small-town gun store, laughter echoed as a black woman was mocked, ridiculed, and treated like she didn't belong. But no one expected that within moments, a decorated commander would walk through those doors and change everything. The eon afternoon sun poured through the large front windows of the gun store, casting long golden streaks across polished counters lined with weapons. The air was filled with chatter and the faint metallic smell of gun oil. Men in heavy boots leaned against racks, swapping stories, while others inspected rifles with the air of practiced familiarity. It was a place of pride, a place where many came to show off knowledge and strength. And into this space the black woman walked. She stepped in quietly, her posture straight, her gaze steady. There was nothing hurried or unsure about her presence. Yet the moment she entered, the atmosphere shifted. Smirks appeared on faces, whispers passed between lips, and a clerk behind the counter raised his eyebrows with a faint look of amusement. It wasn't welcome she received. It was skepticism, the kind laced with superiority. A few customers looked her up and down as though she were out of place, as though her skin and gender disqualified her from belonging in a store like this. A group near the back chuckled, nudging each other as she passed. One voice, half muttered but loud enough to be heard, sneered, "What's she even doing here? Lost, maybe?" Another added with a laugh, "Probably thinks guns are like hairdryers. Pick the light one." The clerk leaned forward on the glass case, his tone condescending as he asked if she needed directions rather than service. She didn't flinch. Her expression remained calm, her stride even, as she scanned the shelves behind the counter. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear, smooth, and unshaken. She asked about a specific firearm, a model not many casual buyers would even know by name. The clerk's smirk deepened. He shook his head, replying slowly as though speaking to a child. "That one's a little heavy-duty. Maybe you should start with something smaller, something lighter, for ladies." The words dripped with dismissal, drawing chuckles from the men nearby. Laughter began bubbling around the store, not raucous but sharp, the kind meant to sting. Each sound was a dart thrown her way, questioning her worth, her knowledge, her right to stand in this space. Yet she remained unmoved. She did not snap back, did not argue, did not even roll her eyes. She simply looked at the clerk, then back at the wall of weapons, her silence louder than the noise aimed at her. The group at the back seized the moment to intensify the mockery. One man picked up a pistol, held it with exaggerated clumsiness, and said loudly, "Here you go, sweetheart. Something easy for you. Just point and click like a remote." Another leaned against the counter, grinning, as he added, "Better watch out, she might hurt herself. Maybe she just came in for pepper spray." The laughter spread, infecting the atmosphere, until it seemed the entire store was united in its ridicule. The sound was heavy, filling the room, pressing in on her like a wall of scorn. Still, she did not break. She stood in the center of it, her hands resting calmly at her sides, her eyes steady and unshaken. There was something in her stillness that unsettled even as it was mocked. The others saw weakness. They saw someone too quiet, too out of place, too easy a target. But to the watchful eye, there was something else in her silence. Her posture was too precise, her gaze too deliberate, her calm too controlled. She was not silent because she was unsure. She was silent because she did not need their approval. A boy, no older than 17, leaned against a display rack, watching quietly. Unlike the others, he did not laugh. He noticed how she carried herself, how she did not flinch when words were thrown like stones. He saw the faint strength hidden beneath her calm, a kind of discipline he could not name but instinctively respected. The others missed it. They saw only a woman to belittle. But the boy felt there was something far more dangerous beneath her quiet restraint. The clerk, sensing her refusal to react, leaned forward again, trying harder to provoke. "Tell you what," he said, tapping the counter, "why don't you let me show you a revolver? Small, simple, good for a beginner, easy enough for you to handle." His words carried the weight of finality, as though her place in the hierarchy of this room had been set. More laughter followed, echoing against glass cases and steel racks. Yet she only drew in a slow breath, her shoulders steady, her eyes still fixed on the weapon she had first asked about. The store's atmosphere thickened with derision, but her calm was a mirror reflecting it all back. No sharp retort, no defensive protest. Just composure, as though she had weathered storms far greater than the petty cruelty of strangers. Every second that passed without her breaking only added to the tension, the unease. Those who mocked grew louder to cover the discomfort rising within them, as if afraid of the question beginning to form in their minds. Why was she so calm? What had she faced before that made this moment unworthy of reaction? The laughter roared. The clerk smirked. The customers sneered. But she stood in the center of it all, steady as stone, silent as shadow. And while the room believed it had her cornered, the truth lingered quietly in the air, unseen but undeniable. They were not mocking weakness. They were mocking power they could not yet understand. The audience, watching, would feel it rising. Like a tide, the suspense that whispered a question none in that room thought to ask. Who is she really? Beneath her silence was a history none of them could have guessed. The woman standing in the center of that store was not defined by their laughter, nor was she made small by their ridicule. Her stillness was not born from timidity, but from discipline. In another life, long before she walked into this place, she had been shaped by years that demanded endurance, forged by trials most of these men could never imagine. Nights of endless training, mornings of relentless drills, the echo of boots striking in rhythm, the weight of commands barked into the air, all of it had carved into her a foundation of unshakable strength. While these strangers mocked her, as though she were fragile, the truth was that she had already endured storms of hardship that stripped away weakness, leaving only resilience. In the recesses of memory, flashes of her past unfolded, the grueling weight of packs on her shoulders as she marched across unforgiving terrain, the bitter cold of dawn exercises when every muscle screamed for rest, but her will refused to yield. The sharp sting of failure met not with surrender, but with stubborn persistence until she succeeded. She remembered standing before challenges that tested not just her body but her mind, her spirit, her very identity. She had learned to lead when no one wanted to follow, to stay calm when panic spread like fire, to protect when others faltered. The woman mocked today was the same one who had stood unflinching in places far more dangerous than a gun store filled with ridicule. She had already proven herself, not to them, but to herself, to her comrades, to those who had relied on her strength when everything was at stake. Her silence in this moment carried that weight. It was not the silence of someone without words, but of someone who did not need to speak to prove worth. Each insult hurled her way glanced off armor they could not see, armor built from sacrifice, perseverance, and victories won long before this day. She had nothing to prove to them. And yet the store grew more restless. Their laughter grew louder not because she was weak, but because her calm unnerved them. They wanted a reaction, something to validate their superiority, but the longer she stood untouched by their ridicule, the more their own insecurity deepened. Among the jeering faces, one set of eyes told a different story. The teenager who had been watching her closely saw something none of the others did. He noticed the straightness of her posture, the steadiness of her breathing, the way her eyes didn't dart around nervously but fixed with deliberate focus. She did not look like someone lost. She looked like someone trained, someone who knew how to hold themselves under pressure. The boy recognized it without fully understanding why. She wasn't ordinary. She wasn't like the laughing men, or even like the clerk who believed control belonged only to him. She carried herself as though she'd already faced down far worse than their shallow mockery. Still, the room pressed on, unwilling to let her silence stand. She finally spoke again, her voice cutting through the noise, asking once more about the specific weapon she had entered for. Her words were clear, steady, without hesitation. Yet the response she received was laughter, harsher now, as though they could drown out the authority in her tone by sheer volume. A man near the counter leaned in with a sneer, his voice dripping with scorn as he said, "What are you even doing here? People like you don't belong with weapons." His words hung in the air like poison, meant to diminish, meant to define her. The others chuckled in agreement, emboldened by cruelty. But she did not falter. Instead, she turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze not with anger, but with quiet resolve. Her voice came soft, almost gentle, yet it carried a weight that silenced even the laughter for a heartbeat. "I know exactly what belongs to me." The sentence was simple, but it landed with the force of something unshakable. It was not a retort, not an attempt to convince, but a statement of truth. She did not raise her voice, did not posture, yet those words echoed louder than all the mockery combined. They carried the authority of lived experience, of battles fought and endured, of knowledge that needed no approval. For the first time, the store wavered. Some shifted uneasily, the boy's eyes widened with respect, and even the clerk hesitated. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the air itself understood that something far greater stood before them than they had realized. And then, before that truth could fully sink in, the sound of the bell above the door rang. The door swung open, and with it came a shift in the atmosphere so sudden it stole the room's breath. The laughter that had filled the air just moments ago faded, replaced by a tension no one could explain. Every head turned toward the entrance, waiting, uncertain. Something, or someone, had arrived, and the mocking tone that had dominated the store was about to be shattered. The bell above the gun store door rang with a sharp chime, cutting through the heavy silence that had just begun to settle after her words. Heads turned instinctively, some expecting another customer, perhaps another voice to join in the mockery. But when the figure stepped inside, the air shifted in an instant. He was dressed with the unmistakable bearing of authority, his stride deliberate, his presence commanding the kind of attention that could silence a crowd without a single word spoken. Shoulders squared, eyes sharp, posture perfect, the man carried himself like someone accustomed to respect. The laughter that had been echoing moments before fell flat, replaced by an uneasy hush. Even those who had been loudest a heartbeat ago straightened slightly, adjusting their tone and stance, as though fearful of being caught in the act of ridicule. The mockers quickly tried to cover themselves, forcing polite smiles and murmuring greetings, assuming this man of authority had entered for them, perhaps to acknowledge their presence or validate their arrogance. But their pretense shattered the moment his eyes swept the room. He did not glance at the clerk behind the counter, nor at the group of men clustered together, eager for recognition. His gaze locked instantly onto the black woman standing alone in the center of the store. It was as if no one else existed in that room. The shift was immediate, powerful, undeniable. The entire room froze. The clerk's smirk faltered, his mouth half open as though caught mid-sentence. The men who had been laughing seconds before stared in disbelief, the confidence draining from their expressions. They had expected this man's presence to reinforce their dominance, to reflect their view of who mattered. But the reality unfolding before them was something they had never imagined. Without hesitation, the commander walked forward, his boots echoing against the tiled floor, the sound of each step slicing through the silence. He passed the clerk, past the group of men, past every person in that store without acknowledgement. His focus never wavered from her. And then, when he reached her, the unthinkable happened. He stopped, squared his stance, and raised his hand in a crisp, flawless salute. The room fell utterly silent. The laughter that had moments ago filled the air was now a memory swallowed by shock. Jaws slackened, eyes widened, and even the air seemed to hold its breath. No one in that room could have prepared for this moment. The woman they had mocked, dismissed, ridiculed as an outsider, now stood in the center of the store being honored with one of the highest gestures of respect, from a man whose very presence commanded reverence. The clerk's face turned pale, the blood draining as realization struck. His smug belief that she was a nobody evaporated. He now stood exposed, his disrespect revealed for what it truly was. Not superiority, but ignorance. The men who had laughed so loudly looked down at their feet, shame creeping into their expressions. Their cruel confidence was gone, replaced by the weight of embarrassment pressing heavily on their shoulders. And then the silence was broken, not by laughter, not by mockery, but by the commander's voice. Strong, clear, resonant with sincerity, he spoke words that filled the entire store. "It's an honor to see you here." The statement landed like thunder, echoing in the stunned minds of everyone present. Honor. The word carried weight, carried meaning, and every person in that room now knew the truth. This woman they had dismissed was not just respected, she was revered. The teenager who had been quietly watching from the corner felt his chest tighten with awe. His instincts had been right. There was something different about her, something extraordinary, and now it was confirmed before his very eyes. He looked at her not with pity, not with doubt, but with admiration that bordered on reverence. For him, the moment was transformative. A glimpse of strength and dignity that would stay with him far longer than the laughter of men who had proven themselves small. The woman herself did not bask in the revelation, did not let pride swell at the sight of their shock. She simply inclined her head toward the commander, her expression calm, her tone humble as she answered, "Just another day." It was a quiet reply, but it carried the weight of all her discipline, all her experience, all the truth of who she was. She did not need to explain herself, did not need to reveal her past or demand respect. Her humility spoke louder than any defense ever could. The narrator's voice lingered over the scene, drawing the lesson from the silence that now hung heavy in the air. True strength does not need to shout. It does not need to prove itself with noise or with arrogance. True strength simply stands, steady and unshaken, until the world can no longer ignore it. And in that gun store, surrounded by those who had once mocked her, the truth of that strength had finally been revealed. The silence inside the gun store stretched long and heavy after the commander's salute. No one dared to move, as though even the smallest sound might shatter the weight of the moment. The commander lowered his hand and turned his gaze toward the clerk, his eyes firm, his presence radiating authority that left no room for hesitation. His voice was steady, commanding without effort as he said, "She is to be given whatever assistance she requires, immediately." The clerk swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced now with a stammering compliance. He fumbled with keys, hastily unlocking the glass case he had been so reluctant to open before, his hands trembling slightly under the scrutiny of both the commander and the woman he had dismissed only moments earlier. The group of men who had mocked her so loudly now found themselves shrinking back, their earlier bravado evaporating in the wake of revelation. They shifted uncomfortably, their eyes lowered to the floor, each of them silently reckoning with the weight of their own ignorance. The smirks that had once twisted their mouths into cruel grins were gone, replaced by tight, embarrassed lines. They had mistaken dignity for weakness, discipline for fragility, and now the truth stood before them, undeniable and humbling. The store that had moments ago been filled with laughter and ridicule was now steeped in an air of respect, thick and unspoken, a respect they had been too blind to see until it was forced upon them. The black woman, however, sought no revenge, demanded no apologies. She did not turn to gloat or to scold, did not relish in their shame. Instead, she moved forward with the same quiet confidence she had carried since stepping into the room. Her eyes scanned the weapons with precision, her hand steady as she gestured toward the firearm she had come for. She did not hesitate, did not second-guess. She knew exactly what she was looking for. As the clerk placed it carefully on the counter, She inspected it with practiced ease, her movements efficient and sure. It was clear to anyone watching that she knew more than she had ever been given credit for. Yet she did not flaunt her knowledge, did not use the moment to display superiority. She simply acted with quiet certainty, her actions speaking louder than words ever could. The teenager, who had been watching everything with wide, curious eyes, finally summoned the courage to approach her. His voice was low, hesitant but filled with genuine curiosity as he asked, "How did you stay calm, with everything they were saying? How did you not get angry?" She paused, her gaze softening as she looked at him. For the first time since stepping into the store, a faint smile touched her lips. Her reply was quiet but clear, each word carrying the weight of a lesson hard-earned. "You never let noise distract you from your purpose." The boy blinked, absorbing the meaning. It wasn't just about guns or about the store or even about the men who had mocked her. It was about life, about discipline, about the strength it took to remain true to yourself when others tried to tear you down. Her words sank deeper than any lecture could have, planting a seed that would stay with him far beyond this day. In her calm, he had seen something greater than defiance. He had seen mastery. Around them, the room remained silent. The men who had jeered stood in their shame, unable to lift their eyes. The clerk's face was pale, his hands fumbling nervously as he completed the transaction. The commander stood firm at her side, his presence a shield against further disrespect, though none dared to offer it now. Respect had taken the place of mockery, reverence replacing arrogance. When her business was finished, she turned calmly toward the door. The commander walked with her, their steps measured, steady, side by side. All eyes followed them. Not a laugh to be heard, not a whisper to be spoken. The room that had once been united in scorn now stood united in silence, their mockery dissolved into awe. She did not look back because she did not need to. Her presence had left its mark. As the door swung open and sunlight spilled across the threshold, the narrator's voice rose, carrying the moral of the moment. They mocked her for her skin. They mocked her for her strength. But when the truth stepped in, all that was left was respect. The image lingered as she stepped outside, the commander beside her, the weight of the lesson hanging heavy behind them. And as the screen faded to black, the closing words remained. Never underestimate quiet strength, for it is often the kind that endures the longest. And never forget that the loudest voices often fall silent in the presence of true honor.